My family sat around a Michelin-starred table in Miami, mocking my $68,000 salary while passing around my sister's $150,000 titanium VIP card. In my cheap discount dress, I let them laugh, calling me a pathetic seaweed cleaner. I took a sip of my wine and simply smiled. They had absolutely no idea that the plain plastic badge hidden inside my purse held the ultimate power to sink her precious underwater resort. Hello to all the wonderful listeners of Maya Revenge Stories. We truly appreciate your continuous support. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely disabled monetization for our channel, leaving us without the budget to keep operating, which means we will have to stop uploading new videos here in the near future and move our operations to Patreon. If you enjoyed today's story, please consider supporting us by joining our Patreon to listen to even better, longer, and more detailed exclusive true stories with multiple emotional voice actors that we simply cannot publish on YouTube. You can join by scanning the Patreon QR code on your screen or by clicking the link in the description or comment section of this video. Now, let us dive right into today's story and meet our 29-year-old protagonist, Hazel Lewis. The crystal chandeliers of Le Bernardin South cast a harsh, unforgiving light on my $20 discount rack dress. I shifted in my seat, the stiff polyester scratching uncomfortably against my skin. Feeling entirely out of place in the middle of Miami's most exclusive Michelin-starred dining room, the air smelled of white truffles, expensive perfume, and the quiet hum of old money. Across the pristine white tablecloth from me sat my family, a triad of perfectly curated vanity, entirely absorbed in their own manufactured brilliance. My father, Richard, a high-powered corporate lawyer whose polished smile never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes, was busy swirling his $300 glass of vintage Merlot. He held the crystal goblet as if it were a scepter, silently judging every waiter who dared to walk past our table. Next to him was my mother, Eleanor. She was a luxury event planner who looked like she had just stepped directly off the cover of a high-society magazine. She spent the better part of the evening adjusting her diamond tennis bracelet and loudly complaining about the lack of caviar options, making sure the neighboring tables knew exactly how refined her palate was. But the true star of the evening, the undisputed center of my parents' universe, was my younger sister, Vanessa. Vanessa was a high-end real estate broker who specialized in selling waterfront mansions to tech billionaires and foreign oligarchs. She possessed that flawless, expensive Miami glow, her skin bronzed to perfection, her teeth unnaturally white. She was wearing a crimson silk designer gown that probably cost more than my rent for 6 entire months for the last 45 minutes. My parents had been hanging on to her every word, treating her less like a daughter and more like a visiting monarch. With a slow, theatrical flick of her flawlessly blown-out blonde hair, Vanessa reached into her limited edition designer clutch. She pulled out a heavy, gleaming black and silver metal card and dropped it onto the table with a soft, authoritative thud. "Behold," Vanessa announced, her voice dripping with absolute, unshakable smugness. "The Oceanic Titanium VIP Pass. $150,000 just for the privilege of holding it. It is strictly invite only, heavily vetted, and completely non-transferable." My father leaned in, his eyes widening with genuine, unmasked reverence. He looked at the piece of metal, like it was a holy relic. "Is that for the new development off the coast, the one the mayor has been whispering about?" "The Azure Drift," Vanessa purred, tracing the embossed silver letters on the card with her manicured fingernail. "The most exclusive, unprecedented underwater mega resort in the entire state of Florida, maybe even the world. Opening night is strictly reserved for the ultra-elite, hedge fund managers, international royalty, and me. We get to drink champagne and dine in a massive structural glass dome 50 meters below the surface of the ocean." My mother clapped her hands together, practically vibrating with greedy excitement. "Oh, Vanessa, darling, that is absolutely phenomenal networking. You are going to secure so many high-figure listings down there. This is what true success looks like. This is what it means to be a Lewis." Then, as if drawn by a magnetic force of cruelty, all three sets of eyes slowly turned toward my side of the table. The warmth and adoration instantly vanished, replaced by a chilling, heavy condescension that I had known my entire life. "And then there is Hazel," my father sighed heavily, shaking his head as he looked up and down at my sensible, plain navy blue blazer. "Remind me again. Hazel, what is it that you do for a staggering $68,000 a year, counting fish scales in the mud?" Vanessa let out a sharp, mocking laugh that echoed slightly over the smooth jazz playing in the background. "Dad, stop it. She does not count fish scales. She is a pathetic seaweed cleaner, or a puddle inspector. I can never remember the actual title she uses to make it sound important." I tightened my grip on my water glass, forcing the muscles in my face to remain perfectly blank. "I am a senior hydrodynamic structural evaluation specialist," I said quietly, keeping my voice even and devoid of emotion. My mother rolled her eyes dramatically, waving her diamond-ringed hand dismissively at me. "Fake titles do not pay the bills. Hazel, look at you. You are 29 years old, sitting in a world-class restaurant looking like a tired substitute teacher. You need to learn to look the part of a successful person. You cannot just wander through life wearing cheap polyester and expecting people of value to respect you." "Exactly," Vanessa chimed in, leaning forward over her untouched Wagyu beef with a sickeningly patronizing smile. "You know, Hazel, I actually feel bad for you. I really do. The developers allow me to bring one support staff member with me to the Azure Drift opening. A personal assistant, basically. If you want, you can come along as my bag carrier. I will even let you stand in the back. It would be a good opportunity for you to open your eyes and see how the ultra-rich actually live. Maybe being around real money will finally motivate you to get a real job." My father nodded solemnly, slicing into his steak. "You should take her up on that offer. Hazel, it is incredibly generous of your sister to let you experience a sliver of high society. Try not to embarrass her if you go." The sheer, suffocating arrogance radiating from my family was almost toxic. They looked at me with such absolute certainty, entirely convinced that they were the masters of the universe, and I was nothing but a peasant graciously allowed to breathe their air. They saw the clearance tag on my dress and the modest number on my paycheck, and they drew their entire conclusion about my worth as a human being. I clenched my jaw so tightly that my muscles ached, forcing back the bitter, scathing remarks that threatened to spill from my mouth. My gaze fell upon the dazzling $150,000 premium card sitting ostentatiously on the desk, the absolute epitome of their superficial conceit. I did not say a word in defense of my career. I did not defend my wardrobe or my life choices. I simply smiled, a thin, polite, almost invisible smile, and nodded at my sister. Let them have their moment of manufactured superiority. Let them worship their heavy titanium card and dream of rubbing shoulders with underwater billionaires. Because tucked away securely inside my cheap, worn-out handbag, sitting on the floor was a plain, unremarkable white plastic ID badge. It did not cost $150,000, but they had absolutely no idea that this little piece of plastic gave me the ultimate, unquestionable legal authority over their precious underwater resort. I was the one single person on Earth who held the power to shut down the entire $2 billion project with a single stroke of a pen. The reality of my profession was far removed from the sterile, perfumed air of Michelin-starred restaurants. I worked for Oceanic Sentinel Protocols, a highly classified, independent private agency, granted supreme oversight regarding marine environmental safety and underwater structural integrity. My family mocked my $68,000 annual salary, completely ignorant of the fact that this base pay was intentionally kept low because it came with a highly coveted, exceptionally rare perk. I was granted absolute, ironclad immunity from all civil liability. In exchange for carrying the immense burden of safety on my shoulders, the state government granted me undeniable, unilateral legal authority over every single submerged commercial structure in Florida. I held the legal power of life and death, the absolute right to halt any development, regardless of the political or financial backing it possessed. For the past 4 months, my entire life had been consumed by the Azure Drift. From the surface, it was aggressively marketed as a $2 billion architectural marvel, a shining triumph of human engineering meant to redefine luxury beneath the waves. However, it was a volatile, ticking time bomb. The resort relied on highly experimental, deep-water, pressure-resistant glass dome technology to house its elite guests 50 meters below the surface of the ocean. Down there, the crushing weight of the Atlantic Ocean did not care about your immense net worth or your designer clothes. The water is a relentless predator. It searches constantly for weakness, violently probing every microscopic seam, every titanium bolt, and every synthetic seal. And for 120 consecutive days, the resort had quietly and consistently failed its critical micro-leak diagnostic tests. While my sister was busy attending champagne mixers on dry land and bragging about her exclusive access to the ultra-wealthy, I was spending 80 hours a week submerged in the freezing, murky depths. I wore heavy, grimy commercial diving suits, my hands completely numb as I meticulously inspected thousands of exterior pressure valves and structural load joints in total darkness. The contrast between my reality and the illusion above was almost poetic. The foreign investors and venture capitalists were practically frothing at the mouth, losing tens of millions of dollars every single week the project was delayed. They were desperate, aggressively pushing the limits of safety protocols just to open the massive steel doors and start recouping their staggering investments. At the dead center of this financial panic was Julian Vance, the chief executive officer of the resort. Julian was a legendary corporate shark, a man known throughout the industry for ruthlessly dismantling rival companies and bending local politicians to his will. In plush corporate boardrooms, he was a vicious dictator, but on the damp, salt-stained decking of the primary construction barge, Julian Vance was nothing more than a nervous, sweating subordinate. He had to bow his head and speak to me with trembling respect. Why? Because without my physical, ink-on-paper signature on the final structural safety approval document, it was a severe federal crime for a single human being to step foot inside those underwater suites. Absolutely no signature meant no grand opening, no wealthy VIP guests, and ultimately, total financial ruin for his entire carefully built empire. He had tried absolutely everything to get me to sign off early. He tried to aggressively charm me. He tried to subtly intimidate me. And he even tried to casually imply a massive $1 million consulting bonus if I simply looked the other way on a few minor infractions. I ignored every single attempt. My focus was entirely fixated on a deeply troubling anomaly I had discovered just 3 days prior, deep inside the core VIP zone, the exact same exclusive high roller section where my sister had purchased her golden ticket. My acoustic instruments had detected a microscopic pressure variance in one of the primary atmospheric regulators. It was a tiny fractional error, the exact kind of discrepancy a greedy, rushed contractor might brush off as a mere sensor glitch. In fact, the primary engineering firm had actively tried to cover it up. They buried the raw data in hundreds of pages of mundane daily diagnostic reports, hoping I would be far too exhausted to notice the slight shift in numbers. They patched the failing joint hastily with cheap, non-compliant industrial sealant and simply prayed it would hold together through the massive opening weekend. They vastly underestimated me. I saw the altered digital logs, and I traced the physical repair myself, swimming through the freezing current of the lower rim to scrape away the fresh paint. I knew the repair was an illusion, a fragile, temporary band-aid placed directly over a potentially catastrophic structural failure. I could have flagged the issue immediately and shut the entire site down a week in advance, but I knew Julian Vance and his wealthy cronies would simply fire the scapegoat contractor, slap another quick fix on the valve, and legally manipulate a different, more compliant inspector into rushing an approval. I needed them backed entirely into a corner, completely trapped with zero room to maneuver, bribe, or manipulate the system. So, I kept my mouth tightly shut. I quietly documented the fatal flaw in my encrypted private servers, packed up my heavy diving gear, and made a silent, unshakable decision. I would hold my final safety signature hostage until the very night of the grand opening. I would wait until the expensive red carpet was rolled out. The vintage champagne was poured, and the billionaires were gathered eagerly at the edge of the water. Only then, with the eyes of the media watching and everything on the line, would I force them to confront the deadly reality they had tried to bury beneath the waves. The surface reception pavilion of the Azure Drift was a sprawling cathedral of reinforced glass and polished steel, floating gently on the rhythmic swells of the Atlantic Ocean. Above us, a breathtaking firework display painted the Florida night sky in brilliant shades of gold and emerald. Inside the massive dome, a string quartet played a hauntingly beautiful symphony, while waiters in stark white tuxedos glided effortlessly through the crowd, balancing trays of imported sturgeon caviar and vintage champagne. It was a sea of bespoke Italian suits, backless designer gowns, and blinding diamond necklaces. The room was packed shoulder to shoulder with the ultra-elite, tech billionaires, international royalty, and influential politicians all mingled together, their collective net worth easily surpassing the gross domestic product of several small nations. I stepped into this dazzling arena completely unbothered by the overwhelming display of wealth. I was not wearing silk or chiffon. I was dressed strictly in the official Oceanic Sentinel Protocol's uniform. It consisted of a heavy, dark gray technical jacket over a black utility shirt, dark tactical trousers, and scuff-resistant steel-toed boots. My hair was pulled back into a severe, tight bun. The only accessory I wore was the simple, unremarkable white plastic identification tag clipped firmly to my breast pocket. In a room overflowing with vibrant, expensive peacocks, I was a grim, immovable shadow of industrial reality. It took exactly 3 minutes for my mother to spot me. I saw her eyes widen in pure, unadulterated horror from across the room. She immediately abandoned her conversation with a local state senator and practically sprinted toward me, her heels clicking aggressively against the polished marble floor, before I could even say a word. Her perfectly manicured hand clamped down hard on my forearm. Her grip was tight enough to leave bruises as she forcefully dragged me behind a towering, extravagant floral arrangement of white orchids, desperate to hide me from the eyes of high society. My father and Vanessa appeared just a few seconds later, their faces twisted into identical expressions of frantic embarrassment. "Hazel, what on earth is wrong with you?" my mother hissed, keeping her voice low to avoid drawing attention. Her eyes furiously scanned my dark gray tactical jacket as if it were coated in toxic waste. "You look like a maintenance worker. I explicitly told you to wear something elegant." My father stepped closer, using his broad shoulders to physically block me from the view of a passing hedge fund manager. "This is highly inappropriate, Hazel. You are actively trying to humiliate us. We are trying to conduct serious business here tonight, and you show up looking like you came directly from a construction site to fix a broken pipe." Vanessa scoffed loudly, crossing her arms over her glittering designer gown. "I told you to dress like a personal assistant, not a trash collector. You cannot stand near us looking like that. Take your radio or your wrench, or whatever it is you brought, and go stand in the back near the catering doors. Do not speak to anyone. Do not look at anyone. If anyone asks, you are just waiting to carry my bags when the party is over." I stood perfectly still, letting their venom wash over me. I did not flinch. I did not argue. I simply maintained a cold, heavy silence, watching their desperate attempts to control a narrative they did not understand. Suddenly, a sharp, electric ripple of energy shifted through the massive pavilion. The string quartet abruptly stopped playing. The low hum of aristocratic chatter died down to an excited whisper. The crowd began to part like the Red Sea, creating a wide, unobstructed path down the center of the room. Advancing through the gap was Julian Vance, the chief executive officer of the resort. He was flanked by a tight, nervous phalanx of international shareholders and high-ranking security personnel. Julian was dressed in a pristine, tailored black tuxedo, but his face told a completely different story. His complexion was ashen, drained of all color. A visible bead of sweat rolled slowly down his temple. His jaw was clenched so tightly that a muscle twitched violently in his cheek. He was scanning the crowd with a desperate, frantic intensity, completely ignoring the enthusiastic waves of the billionaires trying to catch his eye. Vanessa instantly recognized the opportunity. Her eyes lit up with predatory ambition. She shoved past my father, stepping directly into the open aisle to intercept the most powerful man in the room. She stood tall, flashing her most blinding, perfectly practiced charismatic smile, with calculated precision. She raised her heavy metal VIP pass, the $150,000 titanium card, catching the chandelier light, holding it up like a beacon of absolute privilege. "Mr. Vance," Vanessa cooed, her voice projecting brightly over the hushed crowd. "Vanessa Lewis, we are so incredibly thrilled to be joining you in the deep underwater sector tonight. I have some highly influential clients who are very eager to discuss future partnerships regarding—" Julian Vance did not even blink. He did not slow his pace. He did not look at her perfectly sculpted face, and he certainly did not look at her precious titanium card. He walked directly past Vanessa as if she were nothing more than a piece of invisible furniture. The brutal dismissal was so public, so absolute, that a collective, muted gasp rippled through the nearest group of guests. Julian marched purposefully toward the floral arrangement, his frantic eyes finally locking onto my dark gray tactical jacket. He stopped exactly 2 feet in front of me. The entire room fell into an eerie, suffocating silence. Hundreds of the wealthiest, most powerful people on the planet stood frozen, watching the billionaire executive confront the woman dressed like a manual laborer. Then, the unthinkable happened. Julian Vance, a man who ruthlessly controlled global markets and commanded fear from politicians, lowered his shoulders. He bowed his head slightly, a posture of complete and utter submission. His voice trembled slightly when he spoke, entirely devoid of his usual arrogance. "Miss Lewis," Julian pleaded, his words ringing out clearly across the dead silent room. "The engineering department has just finished replacing the pressure valve in Sector B. We have double-checked the seals. We desperately need your signature right now. Please, if you do not sign the safety release, none of the guests will be legally allowed to descend to the underwater area. The entire opening is paralyzed without your authorization." If time could literally stop, it stopped in that exact fraction of a second. I slowly shifted my gaze to my family. The physical manifestation of their shock was a masterpiece. My father's jaw had unhinged, hanging limply as his legal mind completely short-circuited. My mother was clutching her diamond necklace, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish, unable to produce a single sound. But Vanessa was the true spectacle. Her brilliant, charismatic smile had flash-frozen into a grotesque mask of sheer terror and profound confusion. The heavy, $150,000 titanium card in her hand suddenly looked incredibly foolish. Her arm began to tremble, and the shiny piece of metal slowly, agonizingly lowered to her side. The realization hit them all simultaneously, a crushing, invisible weight dropping squarely on their chests. The worthless, pathetic worker they had just ordered to stand in the back next to the catering doors was the ultimate final boss of the entire $2 billion empire. I let the silence stretch out, allowing their humiliation to marinate under the bright, unforgiving lights of the chandeliers. I looked at their pale, terrified faces for one long, cold second, showing absolutely zero mercy. Then, I turned my attention back to the sweating billionaire standing before me. "I will recheck the system myself," I said, my voice slicing through the quiet room like a surgical blade. "No one passes through those doors until I say yes." I turned my back on the pale, sweating executive and walked straight toward the reinforced steel doors of the central control room. The heavy biometric locks recognized my credentials immediately, sliding open with a soft, mechanical hiss. Stepping inside was like crossing into another dimension. The chaotic symphony of the string quartet and the obnoxious chatter of the billionaires were instantly severed, replaced by the sterile, rhythmic hum of massive server racks and the glow of dozens of high-definition sonar and pressure monitors. before the heavy doors could fully seal shut behind me. 3 figures slipped through the narrowing gap. My father, my mother, and Vanessa stepped into the dimly lit, industrial space. The absolute terror that had paralyzed them in the grand pavilion was already entirely gone. In its place was a frantic, predatory calculation. They had witnessed a profound shift in power, and rather than feeling humbled by their previous cruelty, they instantly tried to figure out how to monetize it. Richard, my father, was the first to approach. He quickly smoothed the lapels of his custom Italian suit, forcing his face into a mask of deep paternal admiration that I had not seen in my entire 29 years of existence. "Hazel, sweetheart," my father began, his voice dropping an octave into his professional courtroom baritone. He walked up to my console, leaning against it casually, as if we were old friends conspiring together. "I have to admit, you really had us fooled. You played that situation absolutely perfectly, making the chief executive officer sweat bullets in front of the entire international board of directors. That was a brilliant tactical maneuver, utterly brilliant." I kept my eyes fixed on the telemetry data scrolling across my screen, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a response. I took my silence as an invitation to continue. "Listen to me closely, Hazel. Since you clearly hold all the leverage and have Julian Vance completely backed into a corner, this is the perfect moment for us to synergize. A marine project of this staggering magnitude, a $2 billion experimental infrastructure, requires absolute, ruthless legal representation. My corporate law firm could easily handle their liability contracts and regulatory compliance. All you need to do is hold your signature hostage for just a few more minutes and casually suggest my name to the board. This is our golden ticket. This is a real chance for the family to advance together." Before I could even process the sheer audacity of his request, Vanessa shoved past him. She was tapping furiously on her glowing smartphone screen, her eyes wide with a manic, greedy energy. "Forget the legal contracts for a second, Dad," Vanessa snapped, completely dismissing him. She slammed both her hands down on my control desk, leaning into my personal space. "Hazel, listen to me right now. I need you to override the main lockdown on the VIP elevator. Just give me a 30-minute head start before you let the rest of those snobs down into the dome. If I can live stream the underwater sectors completely empty and entirely exclusive, my social media engagement will literally explode. It will guarantee me at least 5 new high-figure listings by tomorrow morning. Just push the button." My mother stood in the background, nodding vigorously in agreement, her diamond earrings catching the blue light of the monitors. They were completely blind to reality. They looked at my immense responsibility, a burden of safety that dictated the lives of hundreds of people, and saw nothing but a convenient crowbar to pry open the vault of their own selfish ambitions. I slowly turned away from the glowing screens and folded my arms across my chest. The air in the room grew instantly freezing. "It is truly fascinating," I said, my voice echoing coldly off the metal walls. I looked directly into my father's eyes, then shifted my gaze to my sister. "Just 2 hours ago, sitting at a Michelin-starred table, you were incredibly concerned that my $20 discount dress was going to ruin your flawless reputation. I believe the exact term you used, Vanessa, was a pathetic seaweed cleaner." Vanessa flinched slightly, her manicured fingers curling inward. "Come on, Hazel, do not be so dramatic. That was obviously just a harmless joke over dinner." "Was it?" I countered, taking a slow step toward them. "And Dad, did you not ask me what exactly it is I do for a staggering $68,000 a year, counting fish scales in the mud? I believe were your exact words. Mom told me I looked like a tired substitute teacher. You all explicitly agreed that I needed to stand in the back near the catering doors and carry your bags, so I could finally learn how the ultra-rich actually live." My father's fake smile completely vanished. His jaw tightened angrily. "Hazel, be reasonable. Family squabbles are one thing, but this is high-level business. You need to look at the bigger picture here." "The bigger picture is structural integrity," I shot back, my voice slicing through his corporate nonsense like a blade. The bigger picture is the crushing weight of the Atlantic Ocean. You want me to extort a desperate billionaire so your law firm can get a massive retainer. You want me to bypass critical safety protocols and risk a catastrophic failure just so you can get a few thousand likes on a video. My professional ethics are not for sale. Human lives are not your personal stepping stones. The answer is absolutely not to all of your demands. The absolute, unyielding rejection hit them like a physical blow. The sudden realization that they could not manipulate me shattered their illusions of control. My father's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "You are making a massive mistake, young lady," Richard sneered, his true vicious nature finally bleeding through. "You have a tiny sliver of temporary authority, and you are letting it completely warp your mind. You are going to severely regret throwing this lucrative opportunity away." Vanessa let out a sharp, incredibly nasty laugh. She tossed her perfectly styled blonde hair over her shoulder, her eyes burning with pure, unadulterated arrogance. "You really think you are the only person in this building with actual power?" Vanessa mocked, waving her smartphone in my face. "You are just a glorified, underpaid inspector. I have Marcus Thorne on speed dial. He is one of the primary venture capitalists backing this entire resort. He has invested $50 million of his own money. If my own bitter, jealous sister will not open a simple door for me, I will just have a billionaire do it instead. Watch me." She spun around on her expensive heels and marched aggressively toward the exit. She hit the manual release button, completely convinced that her high society connections could somehow override the unforgiving laws of deep-water physics. My father and mother glared at me one last time before hurrying out after her, leaving me alone in the cold, blue glow of the control room. The heavy steel doors sealed shut, leaving me completely alone with the glowing array of telemetry monitors. The silence of the control room was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the cooling fans. But the tranquility was brutally short-lived. On the primary security feed, I watched the immediate consequence of unchecked arrogance unfold. Down in the main lobby, Vanessa had actually done exactly what she threatened to do. Through the high-definition camera, I saw her marching toward the restricted VIP access terminal, flanked by Marcus Thorne, a man whose $50 million investment apparently bought him the delusion of invincibility. Thorne was aggressively cornering a terrified junior security officer. I could not hear the audio, but the body language was universal. The billionaire was pointing a rigid finger at the young man's chest, throwing his shareholder weight around, demanding immediate access. The poor guard, terrified of losing his job and completely unaware of the lethal physics at play beneath his feet, frantically swiped his master keycard. The heavy pneumatic doors of the primary descent elevator hissed open. Vanessa flashed a triumphant, glowing smile directly into the security camera, raising her $150,000 titanium card in a mock toast before stepping inside. 5 other wealthy elites followed her. The doors sealed tightly. The digital floor indicator began its rapid descent toward the seafloor, dropping exactly 50 meters into the pitch-black, crushing depths of the Atlantic. They thought they had won. They thought their money had successfully overridden my authority. But the ocean does not care about your stock portfolio. It does not respect titanium VIP cards. Less than 45 seconds after their elevator began its descent, the main acoustic diagnostic monitor on my console shrieked. It was not a loud, chaotic alarm, but a sharp, high-pitched digital whine that made the blood in my veins freeze completely solid. I whipped my chair around, my eyes locking onto the primary structural chart for the VIP Deepwater Dome. A jagged, blinding red line was actively violently tearing across the center of the blue graph. I rapidly pulled up the raw thermal data. The catastrophic failure I had warned them about was happening right now, accelerated by the sudden introduction of human bodies and the rapid pressurization of the elevator shaft. The sudden violent temperature differential between the freezing deep ocean current outside and the warm, climate-controlled air pumping inside the descent tube was reacting fatally with the compromised pressure valve. The cheap, non-compliant industrial sealant the contractors had used to hide their mistake was rapidly freezing and contracting. On the microacoustic sensors, I could literally see the terrifying result. Microfractures, tiny, invisible spiderwebs of shattered glass, were spreading rapidly across the primary reinforced viewing pane of the VIP corridor. At 50 meters below the surface, the water pressure was immense, pressing heavily against every single square inch of the compromised glass. It was only a matter of minutes before the microfractures connected, completely shattering the dome and instantly crushing everyone inside with millions of gallons of violent, freezing seawater. The control room doors violently burst open. Julian Vance stumbled inside, his pristine tuxedo now entirely disheveled, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. He had clearly seen the red warning lights flashing on his private executive terminal. "Miss Lewis," Julian gasped, practically throwing his entire body weight onto my console. His eyes were wide with sheer, unadulterated panic as he stared at the red anomaly spreading across the screen. "You have to silence that alarm. You cannot let the board of directors see this data. If you trigger an evacuation before the party even starts, the press will absolutely destroy this project. The stock will plummet to zero by tomorrow morning." I did not even look at him. My hands were flying across the keyboard, isolating the damaged sector to calculate exactly how much time the glass had left. "The primary valve in Sector B is actively failing. Mr. Vance, the glass is fracturing under the thermal shock. If that elevator opens into the VIP corridor, the sudden change in air pressure will blow the entire pane. They will all drown in less than 30 seconds. Julian wiped a thick layer of sweat from his forehead, his moral compass completely shattered by his financial desperation. "I will authorize a complete, covert structural overhaul tomorrow morning. First thing, I swear it on my life. Just sign the waiver right now. Let the guests have their underwater dinner. The glass is military grade. It will hold for a few hours. I will give you $3 million, wired directly into your account tonight. If you just clear the screen and sign the paper." Before I could verbally reject his sickening bribe, my father pushed his way into the room, having evidently followed Julian back from the lobby. Richard looked from the sweating billionaire to the flashing red screens, his face twisting into an expression of severe irritation rather than genuine concern. "Hazel, for heaven's sake," my father snapped, stepping forward and angrily pointing at my monitor. "Stop being so incredibly difficult. You are purposefully ruining the most important night of your sister's life over a few numbers on a computer screen. Mr. Vance is offering you a perfectly reasonable compromise. Take the money, sign the damn paper, and stop trying to play God with people's businesses. You are embarrassing the family." I stood frozen for exactly 2 seconds. I looked at Julian Vance, a man willing to drown his own investors to save his public image. I looked at my father, a man so blinded by his proximity to wealth that he was actively encouraging me to gamble with his youngest daughter's life. Down there in the crushing dark, Vanessa was fixing her lipstick, entirely unaware that her arrogance had led her directly into a high-pressure tomb. If I signed the paper, I would keep the peace. I would save the billionaire's pride. I would appease my father. And maybe, just maybe, the glass would miraculously hold long enough for them to finish their champagne. But I was not an event planner, and I was not a corporate lawyer. I was a senior hydrodynamic structural evaluation specialist, and the ocean does not compromise. I completely ignored my father. I shoved Julian Vance forcefully away from my desk. I reached up and violently slammed my open palm directly onto the heavy, shielded red mechanical button positioned at the very top of my console. It was the lockdown protocol. Instantly, the sterile hum of the control room was obliterated by the deafening, bone-rattling shriek of the emergency evacuation sirens. The entire lighting system of the sprawling surface pavilion shifted violently from warm, elegant gold to a harsh, flashing, strobing emergency red. "Protocol initiated," the automated mechanical voice echoed coldly over the resort's massive public address system. "Catastrophic structural failure detected. All blast doors engaging." On my monitors, I watched the safety mechanisms I had meticulously designed finally spring to life, massive, Impenetrable walls of solid reinforced titanium violently dropped from the ceilings of the underwater corridors, sealing off the compromised VIP sector completely. The trap was sprung, the illusion was shattered, and the reckoning had officially begun. The blaring, bone-rattling, emergency sirens tore through the luxurious atmosphere of the resort, echoing across the water like a mechanical scream. 50 meters below the surface, the pneumatic doors of the primary descent elevator slid open. Through the high-definition security feed, I watched Vanessa and her entourage of billionaires step out into the lavishly decorated VIP observation corridor. They were entirely oblivious to the lethal physics actively hunting them. Then, they heard it. Even through the silent video feed, the sheer terror that violently washed over their faces was unmistakable. The primary reinforced glass pane, designed to hold back millions of gallons of crushing ocean, let out a deep, agonizing groan. A jagged, terrifying spiderweb of thick white cracks exploded across the entire transparent wall right in front of their eyes. Vanessa screamed, dropping her $150,000 titanium card to the floor. She stumbled backward, her hands raised defensively. The wealthy elites scrambled over each other like panicked animals, their arrogance instantly evaporating in the face of death. The massive glass buckled inward under the immense pressure, but before the freezing ocean could claim them, the heavy titanium blast doors I had triggered plummeted from the ceiling. The massive steel barricade slammed into the floor just inches from Vanessa's perfectly manicured toes, instantly sealing the compromised zone. A split second later, the fractured glass completely shattered. The violent, crushing force of the Atlantic Ocean instantly flooded the isolated chamber, slamming against the titanium barrier with a terrifying, thunderous boom that physically shook the entire underwater facility. They had survived by a fraction of a heartbeat. Back in the control room, the silence was absolute. My father, my mother, and the disgraced chief executive officer stared at the monitors in pale, trembling horror. The reality of what had just happened crashed down upon them heavier than the ocean itself. If I had listened to my father's pathetic business advice, if I had accepted Julian Vance's $3 million bribe, if I had simply yielded to their relentless pressure and signed the safety waiver to keep the peace, Vanessa and every single billionaire in that corridor would have been instantly crushed to death. The heavy doors to the control room suddenly swung open, and the chairman of the International Board of Directors walked in. He was an older, fiercely intimidating man whose presence immediately commanded absolute authority. He did not look at the flashing red lights. He walked directly up to Julian Vance. "You are officially terminated, Julian," the chairman said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. "Security will escort you off the premises immediately. The authorities have already been notified of your criminal negligence." Julian Vance opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. He was swiftly dragged out of the room by armed guards, his career and his freedom completely destroyed in an instant. Then, the chairman turned his attention to me. In front of my stunned family and the highest-ranking executives of the resort, this profoundly powerful man slowly bowed his head. "Miss Lewis," he said respectfully, "you just saved this entire corporation from a catastrophic loss of human life. On behalf of the board, I want to formally offer your agency a $10 million independent consulting contract to oversee the complete reconstruction of this facility. We need someone with your absolute, incorruptible integrity." I looked past the chairman and locked eyes with my family. They were entirely speechless. My father, the arrogant corporate lawyer who always had an answer for everything, stood completely humiliated. His wealthy partners and potential clients had witnessed him actively trying to compromise the safety of the resort for his own financial gain. His reputation was severely and permanently damaged. A few minutes later, Vanessa was brought back up to the surface by the emergency rescue team. She walked into the room wrapped in a thermal blanket, violently shivering, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. She looked completely broken. The $150,000 VIP card she had flaunted at dinner was now resting at the bottom of the ocean. a chilling reminder that it had almost been her ticket to a watery grave. They looked at me, their eyes filled with a complicated mixture of profound shame, lingering shock, and unspoken apologies. They were desperately waiting for me to say something. They expected me to scream at them, to demand an apology, to finally rub my immense power in their faces and prove that I was better than them. But I did not. I calmly reached into my dark gray tactical jacket and pulled out my standard issue black pen. I signed my name at the bottom of the official field report, permanently suspending the entire $2 billion project, and handed the clipboard directly to the waiting police officers. I walked straight past my parents and my sister without saying a single word. I did not need their validation anymore. I did not need to hear them admit they were wrong. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the Surface Pavilion and stepped out into the cool Florida night. The flashing red emergency lights faded behind me, replaced by the calm, steady glow of the moon reflecting off the water. I took a deep breath of the fresh, salty ocean air, feeling a profound sense of liberation wash over me. The ultimate revenge was not forcing them to grovel at my feet. The greatest revenge was walking away, leaving them to live with the agonizing realization that my worth had never been, and would never be, determined by their shallow, pathetic judgment. Thank you so much to all of our amazing listeners for tuning in to today's story. We would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please let us know in the comments section below. As a quick reminder, because YouTube has disabled our monetization, we sadly will not be uploading any new videos to this channel in the near future, and are moving all of our operations over to Patreon. If you enjoyed today's story and want to help us keep producing content, please support us by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon community there. You can listen to the absolute best, longest, and most exclusive true stories that we simply cannot publish on YouTube. You can join us right now by scanning the Patreon QR code on your screen or by clicking the link provided in the video description or the pinned comment. Thank you all once again, and take care.